If you're interested in advanced extraterrestrial civilizations and things like alien megastructures, then 2024 has been a very exciting year for you. A recent survey of millions of stars have turned up at least 7 candidates and possibly dozens more that may have alien megastructures or Dyson swarms surrounding them, and there are more interesting discoveries that have been made since. 2 very unusual sources of energy, one radio energy and the other microwave energy, have been discovered that defy all natural explanation. There is no astronomical phenomena that we are familiar with that could possibly be creating either of these phenomena, and yet there they are. Now, a variety of different explanations have been proposed, all of which have huge problems, but no artificial explanation has ever been put forward. Why is this? Well, it's simply because the vast majority of the scientific community still refuses to put forward any artificial explanation for phenomena that we find because they are afraid of damaging their credibility with their peers. I, however, have no such hang-ups, and I would like to put forward my own explanations for these phenomena, which, in my opinion, are just as compelling as any natural explanation, and in my opinion, much more likely. Good afternoon and welcome to another Angry Alien Bulletin. Real quick, over the course of the next several episodes, actually, I'd like to progressively thank the folks who have helped me on this expedition to South Carolina, and especially in my effort to get back to the UK. Without your help, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this, deal with this family crisis, or get home, so thank you very much. Matt Corbett, Lois Trowbridge, Jesse Bussman, Carl Stidka, Arthur Long, Arthur Ritalik, James Sanger, Jeffrey Ullman, Dana Coe, Stephen Jackson, John Welsh, John Morgan, Jason Lockridge, Andre Lucas, John Sterling, Robert Vanderkloot, John Capes, Kristen Drew, Edwin Furman. Thank you so much for your support, and there are others besides these folks who made all of this possible. I'll be recognizing all of you over the course of the next week or so. Let's get on to the topic at hand. As I said before, we have made some amazing discoveries as far as astronomical phenomena are concerned this year, the most significant of which have been 2 sources of energy that seem to defy all natural explanation, that do not correspond to any astronomical phenomena that we are familiar with. The first of these is an object that's emitting bursts of radio energy in a fashion that's similar to a pulsar or a neutron star, but not really. The object in question is known as ASKAP J1935 plus 2148, and that just refers to its location in the sky, and it was discovered by a radio telescope in Wajari Yamaji country in outback Western Australia. Now, this object does behave kind of like a pulsar in respects to the amount of energy that it emanates, these bursts of radio energy that seem to correspond to the types of radio energy that we detect from pulsars. But here's the big difference. Pulsars rotate very swiftly, repeating these massive bursts of energy, sometimes several times per second. There are things called millisecond pulsars that take tiny fractions of a second to rotate at incredible speeds, actually a substantial percentage of the speed of light, emanating these bursts of energy many times per second. This object doesn't behave that way at all. It has a cycle almost an hour long, many times longer than any pulsar that's ever been observed up to this point, and during the observations that have been taken of it, sometimes it emits long and incredibly powerful flashes of radio energy, and sometimes fast, weak pulses of radio energy, and sometimes nothing at all. we have no idea what's going on here. This completely defies all known models of neutron stars and pulsars that we understand. Neutron stars should not be able to rotate this slowly, and if they did rotate this slowly, they shouldn't be able to produce this kind of radio energy. Now, the researchers have also considered the possibility of the object being a white dwarf. White dwarfs do rotate this slowly, but they definitely don't produce this kind of energy. If they produce any radio energy at all, we shouldn't be able to detect it at this kind of distance. And then there's the repeating signals themselves. In its first state, there is a bright and linear polarization pulse. In other words, a signal that is linearly polarized rather than circular, and these pulses are very strong and last from 10 to 50 seconds, not milliseconds, 10 to 50 seconds. And then in its weaker state, the pulses are circularly polarized and they last only about 370 milliseconds. And then finally, the third state is a quiet or quiescent state with no pulses at all. So here's the question: what sort of object can produce two such radically different types of radio energy? And incidentally, for those of you who aren't really familiar with what neutron stars or pulsars are, well, they come about when a large star, at least 10 times the mass of our sun, use up all of their fuel and explode in a spectacular blast that we call a supernova. And what remains is a stellar remnant so dense that it's 1.4 times the mass of our sun, and yet it's packed into a ball just 20 kilometers across. And the matter is so dense that the negatively charged electrons are crushed into the positively charged protons, and what's left is an object made up of only neutrons. Now, given the dynamic conditions under which these stars are formed, neutron stars rotate mind-bendingly fast. As I said before, taking just seconds or fractions of a second to fully spin on their axis. The fastest neutron star detected thus far spins over 700 times per second at a considerable percentage of the speed of light. They are unbelievable objects, quite a unique phenomenon in our universe, and yet this one is even more unique because a neutron star capable of producing this type of energy, as I said before, should not be able to rotate this slowly. According to another astronomer responsible for this particular discovery, Dr. Emil Lenz, said the following, quote, "We were simultaneously monitoring a source of gamma rays and seeking a fast radio burst when I spotted this object slowly flashing in the data. Three very different things in one field of view. What is intriguing is how this object displays three distinct emission states, each with properties entirely dissimilar from the others. The Meerkat radio telescope in South Africa played a crucial role in distinguishing between these states. If the signals didn't arise from the same point in the sky, we would not have believed it to be the same object producing these different signals." Now, of course, out of all the articles I've read about this particular subject, none of them explore the possibility that this could be the work of some sort of advanced civilization. Instead, the conclusion that everyone seems to be coming to is that this object has to be a neutron star or a white dwarf of some kind, behaving in a radically different fashion than anything we have ever seen before. Of course, we have no idea how this could happen, but that must be the explanation. It can't be an artificial object, because if it is, you're a nut job and you've lost all of your credibility. But what if you didn't care about credibility and you really wanted to explore an artificial scenario? Well, first of all, we need to look into why pulsars, which by the way were initially regarded as being artificial objects, interstellar lighthouses, so to speak, that would provide navigational beacons for interstellar civilizations. Why was this explanation subsequently discarded? Well, first of all, it's important to notice that we are already using pulsars for navigational purposes. This is the gold disk that was sent out on the Voyager 1 and 2 spacecraft, and at the bottom left is what's called a pulsar map. On the recording is a binary code that explains which pulsars are which by their frequency of rotation. The binary code essentially identifies each pulsar by its rotational period, and by using this rotational period, you can find our solar system in relation to a number of pulsars that can be identified, as I said before, by the binary code on the record. So this system would easily be able to explain to any civilization that comes across the Voyager 1 or 2 spacecraft in the future where our solar system is and how to get there. Now, that's pretty damn useful. But why is it not artificial? Well, for the following 5 reasons. Number 1, the energy expanded was too vast to be from an extraterrestrial civilization. Other sources of pulsation were quickly found. The source did not come from a planet and thus could not come from an intelligent civilization. The source was not narrow-band, and there exists a natural model explaining pulsars. Okay, the first 4 justifications for discarding pulsars as being artificial are completely ridiculous. Yes, the energy expended to create an artificial pulsar would be vast, but in comparison to the overall energy of the galaxy, it's actually very, very tiny. And given how useful these objects would be to an interstellar civilization, actually the expended energy is pretty minor in comparison to the amount of energy that one could gather, say, from a Dyson sphere. Now, other sources of pulsation were quickly found? Well, just because we find many examples of pulsars around the universe doesn't mean that some of them might not have some sort of artificial origin, because if these objects are so incredibly useful to interstellar navigation, it stands to reason that many civilizations might make use of the same technology and not use widely different and largely inefficient methods of navigation when one method is the best. Now, the source didn't come from a planet and thus could not come from an intelligent civilization. That one is very dumb. We are assuming that a civilization could not travel to another star system to create an object like this via stellar engineering, but instead would have to be restricted to their own planet and never develop an interstellar capability. Ridiculous. Now, the source was not narrow band. That is actually somewhat logical because pulsars generally emit their transmissions through a broad band of frequencies, and as one scientist commented, it would be wasteful, purposeless, and unintelligent to diffuse the power of the transmitter over a broad band of frequencies. The only feasible way to transmit would be to concentrate all available power at one frequency, as we do on Earth when we broadcast radio and television programs. Well, that's actually not always the case. Sometimes we use broad bands of transmission as well when we're trying not to get jammed or interfered with. Narrow band transmissions can be jammed, can run into more frequent sources of interference, and are not as reliable if you want to transmit a signal that is absolutely going to be received regardless of circumstances. We call this spread spectrum communication techniques that are robust against the threats of jamming, interception, and cause minor interference to other systems. They are useful for suppressing interference, making secure communications difficult to detect and process, accommodating fading and multipath channels, and providing multiple access capabilities. So if we find practical uses for spread spectrum communication techniques, then why wouldn't an advanced civilization, especially if we're talking about an extremely important interstellar navigation system? Now, the final justification is the best one. We have a very good model to explain why pulsars form, and it's a natural explanation, so why should it be artificial? Well, here is the problem, as we are beginning to find out. Some pulsars actually don't have a good natural model to explain their behavior. There's a variety of millisecond pulsars that have a periodicity that make no sense from a natural perspective. And now we've discovered this new pulsar that absolutely defies all of our models. Are we going to continue to cling to a natural explanation, even though it is really not starting to make a great deal of sense, at least with some pulsar examples in the galaxy? Or are we going to start exploring other possibilities? So what might this object be doing? How can we explain its behavior from an artificial perspective? Well, keep in mind, it's transmitting a very powerful signal, and then sometimes a very weak signal, and sometimes nothing at all. That actually sounds a lot like a binary code to me. The strong transmission perhaps standing for 1, the weak transmission standing for 0, and then the periods of silence being the space between words or the space between numbers. Unfortunately, we have not kept this object under observation long enough in order to determine if there is some sort of rational pattern behind it. In other words, we haven't watched it long enough to determine if the same pattern of strong transmissions and weak transmissions and no transmission is repeating in the same fashion over and over again, or if there is a difference between the transmissions. If it's the same thing, it would be the same number being repeated over and over again, which I think is unlikely, really. I think what is more likely is it's going to be a series of numbers being transmitted, and then that series being repeated over and over again. And the only way you're really going to be able to pick up on that is if you keep the object under observation for days at a time, which is something we have yet to do, and something we should definitely be doing in order to absolutely rule out an artificial origin. How ironic it would be if we were to discover a binary code in this strange object that matches the code that we sent out on the Voyager 1 and 2 plates, a code that matches a number of pulsars in the galaxy and perhaps even provides a map directing us to some other location in the galaxy, perhaps the home system for this civilization, or perhaps just a useful combination of pulsars that would assist in navigating across the galaxy itself for any civilizations that might want to make use of it. This may sound far-fetched to some of you, but how do we know if it's true or not if we don't even bother checking? And incidentally, this object is not the most mysterious that we have detected so far this year. There is another one that is cropped up and has been reported on recently that is even stranger, that matches no known astronomical phenomena whatsoever. It is an object that is blasting out enormous amounts of microwave energy, and we have no idea what could possibly be doing that, especially enough microwave energy to be detected by telescopes at a distance of many light years. The object is called the Millimeter Ultra Broad Line Object, or the MUBLO for short. It was detected by the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array, or the ALMA telescopes, which is comprised actually of 66 radio telescopes, and it can analyze electromagnetic radiation emanating from space at millimeter and submillimeter wavelengths. Now, while examining the galaxy's center, where lurks the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, researchers stumbled across an object that was only emitting microwave radiation. Now, according to the researchers, quote, "We consider several explanations for the MUBLO, including protostellar outflow, explosive outflow, a collapsing cloud, an evolved star, a stellar merger, a high-velocity compact cloud, an intermediate mass black hole, and a background galaxy. Most of these conceptual models are either inconsistent with the data or do not fully explain them. The MUBLO is, at present, an observationally unique object." Of course, you will notice that an artificial explanation is not one of the explanations being considered, not at all. So if this were an artificial object, what purpose might it serve? Well, microwave energy can be converted into electrical energy. As a matter of fact, this is the method we would use to transmit energy gathered by space-based solar power down to Earth. And it is also the method that a civilization might use if it were transmitting energy, say, from a fixed power source to a spacecraft making use of electrical energy for its propulsion. Incidentally, we have already experimented with this type of space-based propulsion, transmitting microwaves to a drone and then converting those microwaves to electricity for propulsion. It's actually been a very efficient method of transmitting energy to a spacecraft, thus eliminating the need for any sort of propellant and any sort of fuel on the spacecraft itself. So might we actually have discovered some sort of galactic power plant? Well, one way to tell would be to see exactly what types of microwaves are being put out by this object. If they are microwaves that are well suited to power transmission, then yeah, that's a bit of a techno signature. If they aren't, if they're more random and natural looking microwaves of some kind, then perhaps not. But still, it's worth investigating these possibilities, and something that astronomers are absolutely not going to do if they value their long-term careers. And this is something that absolutely incenses me. The current scientific majority believes that these sorts of possibilities should absolutely never be explored, no matter how many natural explanations for these phenomena are shot down, no matter how many unusual astronomical phenomena we discover that do not fit into our established theories of stellar evolution. We should never look into an artificial origin. We should never look for aliens, regardless of how many times our search for a natural explanation for these phenomena come up blank. And that is complete ignorance, willful ignorance, and very annoying ignorance. I understand that scientific conclusions need to be based on evidence, and without evidence, we should not conclude that a phenomena is being caused by aliens. But at the same time, if we never go looking for that evidence, then how are we ever going to find it? Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also please check the description for various ways to support this content. And as always, stay angry about space.